Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. We have an incredible selection today. As ever, everything you see here is for sale. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for prices, sales, trades, and remember, everything you see on this show for the first time is on sale, up to 40% off. It is our May event, May 1st through May 10th, so you're going to want to get on this. Now, the timepieces that you see are all listed in the description below with names, references, and where available pricing. Let's jump straight in. There is rarely a year when a Longo und Sohne fails to impress, but back in 2011, the company from Saxony outdid itself. This is the Richard Lange Tourbillon pour le Merite. 41.9 millimeters in rose gold. The dial, which is a Johann Seifert scale, the three overlapping rings, is made of solid silver, so a sterling silver dial, a rose gold, more or less 42 millimeter case, a rare use of a deployant clasp on a Longo watch. The timepiece features a tourbillon carriage, which, as you can see, is completely black polished underneath the dial. Overcoil, free sprung, beaten away at 21.6, but this is a watch that distinguishes itself on several fronts. First, the tourbillon features a hacking function. That is rare. Second, the watch itself features a sort of trap door, as there is a disappearing panel in the hour scale that appears and disappears as necessary, and the best is yet to come. On the reverse side, this is the manual wind, a Longo und Sohne caliber L072. Now, the timepiece features a fusee and chain, so this works like bicycle gears, increasing the mechanical advantage of the mainspring barrel as the mainspring winds down. And as you can see, winding, the chain, which is 20 centimeters long, 1/4 of a millimeter thick, and includes 636 links. It is winding from the barrel to the fusee. If you look carefully, you can even see there's a planetary inside the fusee that allows you to wind the watch without interrupting the torque flow to the escapement. And everything is hand finished. First of all, the bridges are fully skeletonized, so you can see the underlying mechanism. Second, you'll note that there's freehand engraving as well as a little cap diamond underneath the tourbillon. That's right, instead of a synthetic ruby, a real brilliant cut diamond. A Longo und Sohne you never, ever, ever disappoint. Now let's jump to something that is just as spectacular, but of a different persuasion. A flyback chronograph with a perpetual calendar. Launched in 2006, this is the Longo und Sohne Datograph Perpetual. 40.9 millimeters, we'll call it 41. The platinum timepiece features, as ever, a solid sterling silver dial, but galvanized this gray tone. Now you can see applique, Roman numerals, and indices. Technically, this is an extended part of the Saxonia collection. Note the dial is loomed, so you can see it at night, and there is a flyback chronograph complication. What I like about this watch is that Lange is smart, giving you a toggle system so you can adjust everything in sync. Notice if I'm pushing on the selector, nothing happens until I pull the crown to its intermediate position. Now I'm able to advance all of the indications of the perpetual calendar in sync, everything. The day, the date, the month, the leap year cycle, even the moon phase moves in sync. So if I fall a few days behind, all I need to do is pull the crown and get right back up to the current date. Perpetual calendar and a flyback chronograph, and it's all based on the caliber L951, derived from the original 1999 Datograph caliber. It's a manual wind beaten away at a leisurely and pocket watch inspired 18,000 vibrations per hour, black polished swan's neck regulator, black polished column wheel. In fact, everything that turns black as I angle the watch is black polished. Freehand engraved half bridge for the balance, and rare on a Lange, an overcoil hairspring used. Now the watch does feature hacking seconds and a flyback chronograph, but it is the beauty rather than the technical sophistication that grips you. And this is a timepiece with which you can fall in love, case back or dial side. Now let's take a quick look at these watches on the wrist, because I realize I'm cheating you a bit, as I usually show you the watches on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. This one's no exception. The domed bezel allows this 14 millimeter thick watch to sit easily underneath the cuff, and as you can see, it's not excessively broad lug to lug. We'll bring back Richard Lange, just so you can see the same look. This one's actually a little bit thinner than the Dato, and it's broader, which gives it the impression of a much thinner watch. The aspect ratio on this timepiece is incredibly attractive. I've often said that the Jaeger LeCoultre Duometre looks like a model line designed by Lange for Jaeger LeCoultre, and in many regards the Duometre does feel like a Lange. It's not just the aspect ratio of the case, which has that same chunky profile, or the fact that the lugs are broken out separate from the case band. Here, rather than the screw-fixed lugs of Lange, you have true welded lug profiles. This timepiece is very much of the valet de jeu, although it seems to have a little bit of a Teutonic undercurrent. That's because this model, as well as most Lange models, recall the common ancestors of the pocket watch era, and that's the design language we see here. More on that in a moment. Let's talk about the dial. The dial on this 2007 300-piece limited edition, this was the debut model for the Duometre. It has a lovely granular surfacing with an eggshell sort of ecru coloration. Note that there's a mono counter for chronograph minutes and hours, and then there is a scrolling single-digit minutes disc. 2 power reserves, 50 hours each, manual wind in both cases. You actually use the crown, you turn it in both directions to wind the 2 barrels, but the 50-hour power reserve separate in that one side drives the chronograph, one side drives the time-telling functions, and then you have 2 power reserve indicators and the Tourbillon jumping 1/6 of a second, allowing you to resolve the time to 1/6 of a second. Reset it's a wonderful piece of horological theater in its own right. 42 millimeters in diameter by 13.5 millimeters thick. Again, these are welded lugs, not screw fixed. The caliber 380 is a masterpiece, and it is drawn from pocket watch imagery from JLC's Heritage Gallery, the company museum. Now, what sets this apart is it has the drivetrain of a Victorin Piguet, a Bausch made during the 1880s for JLC, which was elaborated to create a complicated repeating chronometer. This allows you to drive 2 separate drivetrains with a single anchor, acting as a traffic cop, switching one on, the other off in rapid succession, on, off, on, off, on, off, so that one drives the chronograph and one drives the balance and the time-telling functions. As a result, when you actuate this chronograph, this is one of the few chronograph watches that will see no reduction in amplitude of the balance or power reserve. Let's throw this one on the wrist. This has a full deployment clasp. Later Duometre models would feature a pin buckle, but back in 2007, JLC was treating its flagship complication right, giving it the upscale strap and buckle it deserves. Again, 42 millimeters. You can see the old conical rather than domed profile bezel. This is one of the all-time milestone JLC watches, and perhaps the company's most important evolution of the 2000s, and that's really saying something. Now, not far from JLC in the Valet de Jeu, you have the manufacturer formerly known as Gerald Genta, and for that matter, Daniel Roth. However, since 2000, under the management of Bulgari, the manufacturer has repositioned itself in the modern era as an ultra-gamme, ultra-thin manufacturer Bulgari that allows Bulgari to create watches like this. This is the Octo Finissimo Automatic in red gold, debuting a year after the watch won the GPHG Men's Watch Prize in 2017. This watch is still 40 millimeters in diameter, 5.15 millimeters thick, 46.5 millimeters lug to lug, but now in rose gold, giving the timepiece a substance the previous almost toy-like titanium watch lacked. Now, what I love here is the attention to detail. Let's take a look at the buckle. You can see it actually sits inside recesses in the individual links, so it's flat and flush when it's buckled down. You can see those little recesses, the hollows that allow it to sit so flat when it's on the wrist. As you can see, there's a small ceramic cabochon outboard of the double knurled crown. You have the rose gold dial with lacquered numerals and indices, and note the juxtaposition of the polygon with the circle inside the bezel. The case itself is said to have no fewer than 110 facets. The movement over, let's see how close we can get here, over 36 millimeters in diameter, but only 2.23 millimeters thick, with a platinum, not gold, micro rotor. Let me see if I can open this up even a little bit more, try to get you a better view without movement. Now, the movement is created entirely in-house, and impressively, despite being less than 2.25 millimeters thick, this micro rotor automatic has a 55 to 60 hour power reserve, and you can see the use of a full balance bridge to add a little bit of rigidity to the movement itself. And of course, there's no trick construction here. The case back isn't integrated into the base plate, none of that malarkey. The timepiece easily sitting on the wrist and visible with the display case back. You get to enjoy the movement, unlike previous ultra thin watches such as, for example, the Audemars Piguet Tourbillon Automatic or modern Piaget watches. You do get a proper display case back here, and no concerns about the crystal popping off or the kind of nonsense that often besets ultra thin watches. And again, more substantial in red gold. You really feel this one on the wrist. We're sticking with French-Swiss watchmaking, but we are recalling ourselves from the Vallée du Jeu to Geneva, and among the best in the business, Vacheron Constantin, traditionally part of the Holy Trinity. In 2007, it launched the watch you see right here, the Patrimony Day-Date Retrograde, a bi-retrograde featuring a complication that Vacheron has made its own in the modern era. 42.5 millimeters in red gold, it's very much of its era, as the 2000s were a period when dress watches got large. However, they did not get thick. As you can see, the case itself is only about 10.5 millimeters thick, and forgive me my fingerprints here. You can see that this roughly 10.5 millimeter thick case also features those sharp welded lug profiles that we saw on the JLC, but here even more pronounced. As you can see, the break between the case band and the lug, the welding almost completely invisible, and that's hand finished. That's how you get that sharp break when welding a separate lug onto a case. Case construction best in the business, and a dial that's surprisingly dynamic for a Vacheron dress watch. Yes, it's only a two-hand time teller, but with a day-date bi-retrograde, it's something more than a little bit special. Now you'll also note that there's a lovely dimple style minute track outboard, and if you turn it over, it's based on the caliber 2460 family of automatics, haute de gamme, 5-position adjustment, guilloche cut, that's real rose lathe engraved, 22 karat winding mass, and then this is a Geneva hallmark movement that beats away at 8 beats per second. 5-position adjustment being the high horology and chronometer standard. So this watch, you'll note one of the more recent examples, as it features the Poinçon de Genève on both the movement and the case since roughly mid-2012. That has been one of Vacheron's signatures, as the Geneva hallmark has expanded to include the entire watch. Now when you throw it on the wrist, it is broad and flat, saucer-like. It's the dress watch for those who don't like petite timepieces, or for those who have larger wrists. As you can see, it's thin, it's slung, it's stanced, it's handsome. The case is anything but sheer, as it has a nice tumble home from top to back, and it sits flush and flat even on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. This is a dress watch for a big wrist, and you can see it has a lot of presence to match. Now, out of Le Chaux de Fonds, a company we don't often discuss, Arnold Son, they are the manufacturer of, or I should say they are the manufacturer brand of the manufacturer La Joux. So Arnold & Son, building everything in this watch itself, launched the UTTE, the ultra-thin tourbillon, back in 2014, and it is ultra-thin, under 9 millimeters thick with a movement that's 2.97 millimeters thick. The 42 millimeter watch is also remarkably short cropped across the wrist with these tiny sharply downturned lugs, allowing the 42 millimeter watch to wear considerably smaller. It feels more like a 39 or a 40 on the wrist. Of course, ultra thin, and you can see how the curvature of the lugs helps. This is another case with a complex construction that involves separate welded lug profiles. Now the dial has 3 finishes. We'll fire up the tourbillon in a minute, but I wanted you to get a better look at it. Oh, there it goes. It's a manual wind watch with over 80 hours of power reserve, but the tourbillon carriage is a flying tourbillon. Note that there is no upper bridge obscuring your view, and it's 14 millimeters in diameter, giving you a tourbillon carriage that truly dominates the dial. It's easy to see, and if you'll note, it's even vaulted with a dome-like profile over its top. You have satin finishing, opaline frosted, and that lovely chiseled dial profile. Now wind it up, and you can see it begins to beat away at 21,600 vibrations per hour. Turn it all over, and you can see this is a special movement indeed, as the caliber 8200 features a freehand skeletonized and engraved underside bridge for the tourbillon. Now you'll also note a twin mainspring barrels with a double solar spiral pattern on the ratchet wheels up at the top. This is an immaculately hand-finished movement that uses the same Côte de Soleil sunburst finish that we saw on the Duometre. A handsome watch that's beautifully handmade from an unconventional and deeply underrated manufacturer. Arnold & Son, of course, La Joux, owned by the Citizen Group, so not only are they a true integrated manufacturer, but they have big group money behind them, meaning they will always be around to service your timepiece. And this is a watch designed to last the ages. Let's talk about sports watches. Let's talk about Rolex, but not the one you see every day. This is a Rolex Zenith Daytona. This is the 16520, late A serial number, original Super Luminova dial, and as you can see, it's probably the most popular version of this watch. The well-loved white dial with the black rings. Call it a sort of modified Panda with the shock of red, Daytona down at 6 o'clock. The 40mm watch is gorgeous and graceful and in outstanding condition. We'll pop this distinctive late 90s bracelet open, throw it on the wrist. 40 millimeters in diameter, it sits flat and flush, as these Daytonas are about 12.3, 12.4 millimeters thick. Now, of course, these timepieces are rare, as Zenith was able to produce approximately 25,000 El Primero movements per year back in the 1990s, and it's important to remember that some of those went to Rolex, some of those were kept for Zenith's own watches, and some of those went to other brands using the El Primero, with the result that production of these Zenith Daytonas from 1988 to 1999 was constrained by Zenith's production capacity, not by Rolex's, with the result that these are not just eminently desirable and borderline vintage, they are also far scarcer than the in-house Daytonas that came after, and I do mean considerably scarcer. This one's in outstanding condition, and I'll demonstrate one of the means of judging. We'll prevent my camera from going flying here, but you can see that the bezel itself, which features lacquered fill for all of its calibrations, it is immaculate. Not only does it retain its original factory black polish, but you can see that all of the lacquer is still fully intact. Nothing's been worn off or finished off. This is a watch that has lived a benign life. As you can see, the lugs are symmetrical and even from side to side and end to end. There's a lot to love about this watch. One of the reasons that it's so great is because in 1988, when this Daytona debuted, Rolex essentially nailed the design language for the next 3 decades. The timepiece appears almost identical to a modern day Daytona. The size hasn't changed, the profile hasn't changed, the dial hasn't really changed. What's changed? Well, the bracelet's changed over time. This is a vintage correct piece, and of course the movement has become in-house, meaning they've made a lot more of those, but the original El Primero based Rolex caliber 4030 is the most important part of this watch, which is still 100 meters water resistant, sapphire crystal, automatic winding, and a COSC chronometer. That's why I say it's the best of both worlds. It has rarity and vintage status now on its side, but it's still capable of being worn like a modern watch, and it's almost indistinguishable from a modern day Daytona. Now, jumping back a little bit farther, no one would dispute that 1975 is true vintage, and this Rolex Submariner 1680 is a beautiful example. As you can see, there's just enough bezel fade without any bezel damage. The luminescent tritium pearl of the bezel is still intact. It has the characteristic period mile-high plexiglass crystal, and then you can see that the bracelet, which is a period-correct piece, is in outstanding condition. The dial is a lovely tritium fade, and note the triple symmetry of the bezel, the hands, and the dial, each one evenly faded and symmetrical in color. Now, popping this open and throwing it on the wrist, the watch is a 3.9 million serial, which is why I date it to 1979. It's a watch you can definitely wear every day and wear with pride. As you can see, there's still a considerable amount of the original factory beveling on the lugs, and you can see that on both sides. This case retains almost all of its original metal. Well, it's certainly been refinished a few times. It's been refinished professionally and with a sympathetic eye to the original Rolex case form. This is a timepiece that represents an outstanding daily driver. Not a museum piece, no, I wouldn't make that claim, but a watch so good it can easily anchor a vintage collection, and a watch that you could proudly wear every day, as the caliber 1575 on the inside remains a chronometer spec movement serviceable by any knowledgeable watchmaker, dead reliable even to this day. And of course, vintage watches do have just a little bit more character, color, and soul than modern production. But if it's modern production you want, they don't come much better than the Omega Seamaster. Technically, this is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter, a timepiece that was new on its 25th birthday back in 2018, now 42 millimeters, and this is one of the most attractive variants. A handsome medley of traditional yellow gold and stainless steel. This is two-tone done right in the modern idiom. The timepiece features a ceramic bezel insert with perma-bonded gold. Omega calls it Ceragold, and the dial itself is a gloss-finished ceramic Omega Wave fashion disc that has most of the advantages of enamel in terms of its gloss, its gleam, and its resistance to oxidation without the vulnerability or expense of enamel. Let's hear the bezel. Easily the most positive on any Diver 300 meter I've encountered. Omega nailed it for this generation. There's a new conical helium escape valve rather than the cylindrical predecessor. I call this one the Reese's Cup, and you can see that it features an HE logo, reminding you that it will release helium from the case if you are a saturation diver using exotic gas mixtures. New is the fact that you can now unscrew it and open it when you are still underwater before beginning your descent. Inside the case, you can see there's a caliber 8800. 55-hour power reserve. Let's get a little bit closer, and we can, so we may as well. 55-hour power reserve, coaxial master chronometer, amagnetic, not anti-magnetic, and of course, a movement that is exclusive to the Omega brand, so you won't see it on any other Swatch products. You can see that the bracelet is more sturdy than it was back in the 90s when this became an icon on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan as 007, and we now feature removable links, including half links that are fixed by screws. There is a fold-out extension, but for the first time on the Diver 300 meters for 2018, we also got an incremental slider with about 1 centimeter of total travel, and as ever, the clasp itself remains milled from the solid. This is a timepiece that gives you everything you might need in a modern diver, right down to 300 meters. I would even say that with this watch in the catalog, you sort of second guess why Omega is still building the Planet Ocean, as this piece is more comfortable, better sized, with a handsome aspect ratio and a thinner case profile that fits under a cuff. This is a watch you can wear all the time, and I don't always say that about the Planet Oceans, and certainly not about the gargantuan Ploprof. This might be the best watch that Omega makes. And this might be the most distinctive watch that Omega makes. After the anniversary hoopla of 2017 and the Triple Trilogy collection, we had a new version of the Seamaster Railmaster that bowed in 2017, new for 2018. This is the Omega Seamaster Railmaster Denim Blue or Blue Jeans. It is based on the 2017 Seamaster Railmaster, which was the less vintage-inspired, shall we call it, impression watch rather than tribute model. Only here you can see the dial has changed dramatically with a luminous array of strakes, different colors and tones designed to evoke jeans. So you see that blue denim dial with all its woven complexity, and then we have a matching denim strap. It is a hybrid leather and denim, and as you can see, it's calfskin and denim with a gusset, so it's harder to gouge and wear down the individual apertures. You'll note that it is a NATO-style underslung strap. This is a 150-meter water-resistant watch. Mechanically, it's identical to the Diver 300-meter you just saw, a master coaxial 55-hour power reserve automatic with the silicone hairspring. And then note the quality of what you're getting. This is a beautifully turned-out NATO, possibly the most opulent NATO strap ever made. Now, the watch itself is 40 millimeters. It does wear a bit larger on the wrist with this strap. As you can see, it has a broader stance and more presence. So if you like the idea of the 40 millimeter Railmaster, but you want a bigger watch, getting it on the strap is a way to get the wrist presence without the bulk and size in the case itself. And it has a lovely matte or satin finish that, to my eye, is more attractive by some margin than an alternative high polished case would be. And we're going to stick with that satin case theme, and we're going to turn back the clock to 2002. 300 pieces for 2002. This is the Panerai Luminor Marina Destro PAM 117. As you can see, all titanium. It is the lefty, or properly speaking, Panerai calls these Destro watches, and you can wear them on either wrist. The fact is, it's an ambidextrous piece, and when you throw it on a conventional left side wrist like mine, I'm right-handed, I wear my watch on the left hand, and this watch sits easily just like that. Now, you can also throw it on the opposite hand and wear it just as easily. A timepiece that is feather light in titanium and being manual wind, considerably thinner than most Panerai Luminor models. This is a special timepiece, chronometer certified. You can see the 56-hour manual wind power reserve. This is the OP2, and it's COSC because that's how they rolled, and you can have COSC with the seconds hand, which this version has. It's upgraded from the standard ETA 6497 in that it has a higher beat rate at 21.6 rather than 18K. It has a 56-hour power reserve rather than 42. It's chronometer certified rather than not, and the bridges have been heavily customized for Panerai service. And despite the use of a display case back, this watch remains 300 meters water resistant. Now, of course, the icon of every Panerai Luminor is the crown device, and the crown device on this watch is spectacular. A wonderful way to unlock a crown. You can fully manipulate the watch, set the time, wind the watch once the crown has been withdrawn. You simply push it back down to relock the watch and achieve 300 meter resistance. When the crown guard is up, the thing is unlocked, so you never wear out the crown seals by threading the crown and the stem in and out. That was the original idea behind this system back when all Panerai watches were manual wind, but it's also a design icon. You already know which watch this is when I do that, and it's a better crown guard than a shoulder guard, which always has the risk of direct impact. Here, even a glancing blow, even a square blow is unable to contact the stem assembly. A good looking watch, and again, I'll throw this on the wrist from a bit more distance. Being titanium, it's easy to wear, it's feather light, it's hypoallergenic, and I do like the satin gray metal look, which I find a little bit more desirable on the Betterini or Tunican profile 44 millimeters that you see right here. Now, leaving the Betterini cases in the past, back in 2019 we saw perhaps the most interesting Panerai dial in a decade. This is the Panerai Radiomir 1940 3 days PAM 791. The 791, as you can see, is an unusual looking watch. From the dial to the hands to the plexiglass crystal, everything about this watch is a little bit different. Now, what sets this 500-piece limited edition apart is that it's designed to evoke a clock, not a watch. And that clock, allegedly made in the 1930s, belonging to Panerai, is not necessarily an unusual design, as German-made clocks featured dials like this from the 30s through the 50s, but it's incredibly unusual to see this cream-colored clock face on a Panerai watch. 47 millimeters in stainless steel. You can see it uses the second-generation caliber P3000, which features a almost Geneva-style finger bridge profile leading down to the escapement, rather than the three-quarter style bridge that Panerai previously used on this movement. Back when the original came out in 2010, it was one big bridge. Now you have that finger-style train that's a bit more elegant, and the timepiece, 100 meters water-resistant, is a full-service sports watch. So while a bit unconventional for a Panerai watch, it's just as accurate, and it is just as tough. I should mention that it features a 3-day power reserve manual wind, and because we love to demonstrate features, I'm going to show you the screw-down crown. Different from the traditional Luminor locking system, but remember, this was the first Panerai system back in the 30s when Panerai watches were being made by Rolex. They featured a screw-down oyster-style crown. Now you see there is a time zone function that allows me to change the hour hand independently of the minutes. So if you are traveling with your PAM 791, you can easily change the time without hazard. And it is a shock-resistant watch with a full balance bridge and a free-sprung index, so it can take its hits. You'll also note there's a lateral satin finish across the bridges designed to evoke the Angelus and Rolex Codebert pocket watch movements used from the 1930s through 1980s in Panerai watches. Ah, Patek Philippe. You always have something to brighten my day, and in this case, it's the original 5960. This is the 5960p, launched at Basel World 2006. It was perhaps the most interesting Patek Philippe of the 2000s, featuring a flyback automatic annual calendar chronograph. This watch has it all. 40.5 millimeters in platinum and remarkably sculpted. It's a graceful case profile that looks almost like a giant Rolex Datejust. Now, you'll appreciate the fact that Patek didn't skimp and you get a matching platinum deployant clasp, but what really sets this watch apart is the dial. The dial of this watch is built with a mono counter at 6 o'clock, a power reserve indicator, an AM/PM indicator, and an annual calendar. The way Patek kept everything clean was by placing the chronograph minutes and chronograph hours coaxial down at 6 o'clock. And if you look at the base of the mono counter, or the bullseye as it's affectionately known, you will see there is a little blue circle. That is your AM/PM indicator. It warns you when not to use the pusher adjusters to make adjustments to the annual calendar system. Of course, being an annual calendar, it is capable of making all the jumps except from February to March, so you adjust it once annually. Now, of course, it is also a flyback chronograph on top of everything else. There are multiple complications at play on this dial, and because the watch does not have a constant second subregister, the vertical clutch of the chronograph allows you to keep the chronograph engaged on a full-time basis, so you will always have motion on the dial. And though it does not feature hacking seconds, clever Patek owners will realize they can set the time and then use the flyback function to effectively hack and synchronize their watch. You want more? You got it. It's fully lumed, a watch you can see at night, with applique white gold indices, a lovely anthracite gray sunburst metallic dial, many different colors, tones, textures, and materials. Don't forget the 55-hour power reserve indicator hiding beneath the index up at 12 o'clock. Turn it over, you got the CH 28520. A beautiful looking movement. You can see this is all Patek Philippe. It was the company's first ever automatic in-house chronograph caliber. As you can see, this is one of the older examples, the original 2006 model, built from 2006 through mid-2009 with the Geneva hallmark. Afterwards, they would pick up the Patek Philippe seal. If you want rarity, you want one of the earlier models, and this is certainly that. It beats away at 4 Hertz with a free-sprung gyromax style balance. We'll rotate everything so you can more easily see the reset hammers, as well as the column wheel assembly, and it is both column wheel and vertical clutch. This Platinum Patek has it all. Throwing it on the wrist, it is very comfortable. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, in spite of the fact that it is 40.5. You can see that top Vesselton diamond between the lugs, signifying this as a modern Platinum Patek Philippe. Power reserve, flyback chronograph, annual calendar, AM, PM, 55-hour power reserve, vertical clutch, column wheel, and Geneva hallmark. This watch offers everything you could want in a compact package that anyone can wear. Now, before we jump back to the world of Patek, we may as well talk about one of the rarest Grand Seiko options on the market. 20 pieces made. This is the SPGA 385. This is the Zuri in platinum, 44 GS case with black polished Zaratsu faceting. You can see that mirrored Zaratsu finish, which is achieved by holding the case directly by hand against a spinning tin plate. This is a practice that originated in Europe, but today the foremost practitioners of Zalitz machine black polishing, or Zaratsu finish, are the artisans of Grand Seiko. So you're looking at a watch that is 40 millimeters in diameter, 10 pieces made, hand-finished platinum on the outside, with a Zuri, or shiny painting dial, featuring handcrafted individual faceted applique indices and hands. And if we get super close to the dial, you can see some of the features of the dial furniture that set Grand Seiko apart. First, look at the faceting of these individual indices. They are anything but simple bars. They feature sharply defined facets that are achieved by a micrometric artisan with diamond-tipped milling tools. You can see the same has been rendered on the black polished Dauphine hands at center, which have their own razor-sharp faceting on the edge. And then you have a fired blue steel counterweighted Lancet seconds hand sweeping smoothly to remind you that this is the signature spring drive technology, accurate to plus or minus 10 seconds a month. Why? Because this is the Hot Rod 9R15 spring drive, not standard spring drive. Standard spring drive before 2020 was accurate to 15 seconds a month. This, and you know because there's a gold medallion on the rotor, is accurate to 10 seconds a month. Now, you can see the unidirectional governing wheel that effectively slows or speeds up the motion of the movement. All of the energy here is derived from the spring. There are no motors, no stepper motors, there's no capacitor, there is no battery. All the energy is mechanical at first, and later it becomes kinetic and electric energy, as there's just enough induced current to wake up a quartz oscillator that, using a back EMF or electromagnetic force, will slow or speed up that unidirectional governing wheel. It spins in one direction, and it acts as effectively the brake or the accelerator in the drivetrain that turns the hands themselves. I should also mention that this watch does it all, as it is 100 meters water resistant, and it features a full platinum clasp, a rarity, as I've never ever found a clasp that employs Platinum 900. Let me see if I can show you this. But Platinum 950 is soft, but it's the jewelry standard. Rather than use platinum in swing arms of clasps, many companies use white gold. Here, Grand Seiko used the harder Platinum 900 to keep the entire clasp comprised of platinum, so there is no gold in the clasp of your Grand Seiko SPGA 385. Throw it on the wrist. This is a legitimate alternative, a craft-based alternative, a scientifically superior alternative to the likes of Patek, Lange, and Vacheron. I class it in that company. The movement itself isn't finished that grade, but it is tuned to that grade. It's the dial and the case where all the handcraft makes itself felt and seen on the SPGA 385. And again, 20 pieces. If you're going to go ultra haute de gamme, go with something you'll never see again on someone else's wrist. If I were to name my top 10 favorite watches, this one would be in the upper half. Launched in 2005, this is the second generation Ulysse Nardin Sonata, a timepiece that is 42 millimeters in white gold, but all of the action is on the dial side and inside the case, where a monstrous caliber 67 pivots on 109 jewels. Let me show you why. Note the minute repeater style governor on the dial. This is the alarm watch that thinks it's a minute repeater. Let me talk about all the features available on this watch. First, you have cathedral style gongs underneath the case back, just like a cathedral gong minute repeater, the highest grade of gong architecture, wrapping 1.5 times around the movement rather than just once. You have a dual time display with a 24-hour second time zone, a bidirectionally settable double-digit dates. You can set it forward or backwards with the quick set. There is an on-off function for the alarm, which in addition to the cathedral gongs, has a governor, a centrifugal governor like a minute repeater, to slow the cadence of the chimes. Now, not only do you have a dual time with an alarm, but there are 2 different ways of setting the alarm. Most alarm watches cannot be set in a 24-hour format. Not only can the Sonata be set that way, the Sonata can be set as a countdown alarm, something almost unheard of in mechanical alarms. You can set it by countdown over a 24-hour period, or you can set it using conventional clock time. You can also note that there is a GMT plus or minus system on the flanks of the case that allow you to quickly adjust the local time forward or backwards in 1-hour increments. Now, the case is beautifully made. UN makes its own cases. You can see in white gold, all of high polish with a concave bezel and individual numbering. This is a very special watch, an absolute feast of sights and sounds. It's also fairly comfortable. Despite the lug profiles, which look massive and frankly are, it's the curvature of the lugs that allows them to fit on a smaller wrist and makes this a supremely comfortable timepiece. The Sonata is good. Launched in 2003, it was almost perfect. In 2005, with the addition of cathedral gongs and a display case back, this one ran the table. Let's take a quick look at the display case back, so you get a better sense of the automatic movement. Distantly based on the Lamagna architecture, it's a bidirectional winder with a magic levers system, so a very efficient winder with a lovely 22-karat rusticated finished white gold rotor with a lovely lacquer UN anchor inlay. Gorgeous stuff front and back. Now, I can already hear some of you complaining that there were no Lume shots in this episode, so I'm going to do my best to oblige you now with the Seamaster before we jump to the grand finale. All right, there we go. Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. Note that the bezel pearl and the minute hand are of a differential green color, making it easier to see them when you are diving at night or simply referencing your watch in the dark. What about the Panerai, you ask? PAM 117, reporting for duty. This is as good as it gets in terms of Lume shots. Panerai, you never disappoint. Let's finish with a big piece. Patek Philippe, Grand Complication, 52041R. Launched in 2016, this is the full bracelet rose gold split second perpetual chronograph. A perpetual calendar with a rattrapant built in. The watch is surprisingly wearable at 40.3 millimeters. Absolutely monstrous with a loomed dial, a split second chronograph thanks to coaxial pusher in the crown, and of course the perpetual calendar on a black lacquered dial base. This thing is the bee's knees. Also note the attention to detail, as Patek's bracelet allows you to set the perpetual calendar through the end links. Let's throw it on the wrist real quick and then talk about the mech and the spec. This watch is surprisingly easy to wear. The successor to the legendary 5004, the 5204 is graceful and comfortable. Though bigger than its predecessor, it's just as artfully crafted with a handsomely contoured bezel and case profile and that lovely welded lug junction that I happen to love. As you can see, this is an all-the-time watch, assuming you've got the panache to pull it off. This thing is redolent of the French Riviera, Miami Beach, yachts at Monaco, and the Sunset Strip. And of course, that's before you get into the engineering on the reverse side. The movement, manufacture now. Patek Philippe CH29535. You'll note the split-second chronograph bridge on the center, and I'll demonstrate the operation of the second column wheel. The watch actually features 2 of them. da and da. Note the maze of delicate springs that operates the pincer system, holding and releasing the seconds hand. And of course, this watch being a perpetual calendar, it can handle the jump from a conventional month to an irregular length month. It can handle leap years. It's got all of that covered. We'll fire up the chronograph, assuming I remembered to wind the watch today. I should also mention that this is a watch that, once manually wound, I admit, has a 65-hour power reserve, so there have been many technological steps forward compared to the prior 5004. Now you can see the split-second chronograph is a wonderful piece of visual fireworks, allowing you to gauge the waxing or waning gap between, say, two runners around a track or cars around a race course. 65-hour power reserve, manual wind, 4 Hz beat rate, 6 position adjustment, overcoil hairspring, free-sprung gyromax, and as you can see, an absolute jungle of steel chronograph components and rhodium-coated brass bridges, gold, silver, and the violet of pivot jewels. It's a wonder on your wrist. Now guys, remember, all these watches are up to 40% off. This is our May event, but it's only lasting through May 10th. So you want to reach out to me real quick, tmosso@thewatchbox.com, because not only are these watches on sale, but they are going fast. Thanks so much. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.